Hello, welcome to Plod with me. My name is Colin, and this is the channel where I take you around bits of London and tell you a bit about their history. And with absolute perfect timing, literally about 30 seconds before I hit record, all the church bells started up, so sorry if that's a bit distracting in the background. So today we are, at the minute I'm standing outside Charing Cross station. We are going to take a walk from about 1550 up until now, which is 2025. And I discovered recently that there is a street through Soho, part of Soho that I previously hadn't really investigated. And it's a street that's there, and it's been there, that pathway, since at least the mid-16th century. And it's still intact. Obviously, in those days it was all fields, and now it's not. But I thought we'd walk that path and basically take a step through time. But, so why start here, down at Charing Cross station? Well, it's because of this. Let me just tilt up a bit for you. You see that large, old-fashioned building in front of you? Building, sort of spire. That is a replica of what's known as the Charing Cross. Now, I'll give you a little bit of history. Let's see if I can get across here without getting run over. Peace. Well, I suppose it is Sunday morning. I can let them off. Oh, there's a little explanation for it. I'm going to do my explanation, but in case any of you want to pause this and have a read, I'll do a close-up. Hold on. Alright, so if you're interested and you want to have a read of all that, it's there. So, essentially, let's tilt up. Essentially, there were 12 of these crosses made between Lincoln and London. And they date back to about 1290, 1291, because the then King, Edward I, his Queen Eleanor, died. And obviously they must have been up Lincoln Way whenever that happened, and he wanted to bring her back here to Westminster Abbey to be buried. But along the way they stopped off 12 times and built a cross at each place, and it gave the population a chance to see their Queen. I suppose I'm going to take an educated guess. I'm also guessing the reason why there was 12 stops is because there is the religious thing about the 12 stations of the cross, isn't there? So I think it's got something to do with that as well. Now, bear with me. I've just got to clip my microphone on top of the camera, which basically means you won't see me for the duration of this tour, because this is the new microphone setup I'm trying, whereby, there we go, whereby I have the microphone facing me, but the camera facing away. Now, let me just bring this down. Right. Oh boy. Bear with me, I'm having a fight with the camera now. There we go, that's better. Okay. So yes. So, the Charing Cross. This one here, and I'm going to take a wider angle shot of it. This one here is a replica. The original was situated nearby, which we're going to visit. And this one is probably what gave its name, it's what gave the name to this area, Charing Cross. It was previously known as Charing, and Charing basically meant a place where the river bends. So I suppose it was close to a bend in the River Thames. And then whenever they built the cross, it became known as Charing Cross. And as I say, the original was destroyed in the 1640s by those happy-go-lucky religious types of Puritans, you know, the Oliver Cromwell's lot, the ones that cancelled Christmas. And because they saw this as sort of idolatry and worshipping idols, the original was destroyed, and a lot of the ivory and everything was made into like handles for knives and forks. But whenever the train station came, here you go, Charing Cross train station, 1860s, Charing Cross train station arrives, and like a lot of the big stations, what immediately follows or arrives with it is a hotel. And the hotel in 1864, I think it was, I think it took a couple of years, the hotel basically had this replica made as a little sort of, I suppose, tourist site and representative of the origins of the area. So they used what little artist impressions they had of the originals that survived up until the 1600s. But also there were some of the crosses around between here and Lincoln that were still intact. And whoever it was that designed this one, whose name I can't remember, but I'll insert it, they used the originals that were still intact and whatever artist impressions they had to recreate this one. So it's a replica, and how accurate it is hard to say. Okay, so all that noise we're hearing is coming from St Martin in the Fields. That's it, just across the way there. But we are going to make our way down to the site of the original Charing Cross, and to be honest, where the tour really was supposed to start. I just thought I would throw this little bit in because I thought I would show you a rough idea of what the original Charing Cross looked like. At some point very shortly, I'm going to cut to a map, probably about now, just to show you where we are. Okay, so you see this guy on the horse? We're not going to talk about him today, but that is where the original Charing Cross stood. Okay, so we are at this point. Down there, you see Big Ben at the centre down there. This is Whitehall. So from the earliest days of London onwards, and certainly increasingly from about the year 1000 onwards, down that way, Westminster, political power. Up the Strand, where we just came from, that was the road that led to the city, and so that was the business power, trading, where all the money was made. Now, bear with me, my camera seems to be wobbling a bit, and I'm not sure why. Hold on, I'm just going to have a quick find. Maybe that's a bit better. Okay, so yes, business money. And this junction, this is what's called Charing Cross. This is on the map that we're looking at, 1550, and a later one, date from about the 1880s. I'll cut the those on shortly. And this point is where London measurements are taken from, if you see what I mean. So like if you were outside of the city of London, you were travelling down by car, and the road sign said 50 miles to London, this is the point that it goes to. This is where they use as a measuring point. Now, Trafalgar Square here, Nelson's column in front of us. Oh, let's scroll up so while we're here. It's a nice sunny day. There we go. Oh, look, a double-decker bus, very touristy. Okay, so Trafalgar Square. At the times we're talking about, 1500s, that whole area is what's known as the King's Mews. So it was a big complex with stables, and it was where he would have kept his horses for hunting, but also his hawks, because that's what a mews, that's the origin of the name. It comes from the French, something to do with the molting of the birds. But basically he would have kept his hawks there and all the horses, and then when he went hunting, that's where he would have went to collect everything. And you know, off he'd go riding up around Soho or wherever, which is where we're headed. So, but this junction was here. This, you know, this point, this triangular bit on the roads. St Martin in the Fields, was it there? I think it was. If not, it was very soon after. But I think certainly there was a church there, and that's why it was called in the Fields, because all this was fields. So we are standing at a point on a map in 1550, which still exists today, and we are going to follow a path. Now, the road we are going to follow swings round to the left here. Obviously the Canadian embassy wasn't there then, because Canada wasn't a political entity at that time. But the road that we're following is still the same, so we're going to swing round to the left, and then you'll see in the map that the road forks north. The left hand fork is Haymarket, where you can go and see Phantom of the Opera and all that. The right hand fork is the start of the street that goes up towards Soho, and it was called Coleman Hedge Lane, and it led all the way up to a road called, which was basically known as the Road to Uxbridge. These days you might know it by a slightly different name, namely Oxford Street. So looks like I'm safe. Okay, so we are following the road that you could have taken up a country path up to what would have been Oxford Street in the 1550s. Now, while I'm standing here waiting across the road, I should mention, if you like this sort of stuff, like a bit of history, let's face it, my walking around here today is a bit of contemporary history. You know, 100 years from now, if YouTube's still going, people might be looking at this as seeing bits of London and going, oh, that's how it used to look before it got flattened in a nuclear disaster. But if you do like this sort of stuff, the historical walks, hearing a bit about the history of the city, feel free to subscribe. Up above that one over there, as you can see, it says Grand Trunk Railway. Why? I'm not sure. Actually, you can see the poster of Phantom of the Opera. So that's the bottom of Haymarket. So that is the left-hand fork that we can see on the map. Why is my camera wobbling? Come on, camera, tell me what's going on. I wonder if something needs tightening. Bear with me. I've got to say, I'm not sure. Okay. So like I say, that's the left-hand fork. That's the street that's been built in the meantime. We are headed for this one. So this was the original Coleman Hedge Lane. Now over the years, as the city developed, it got different names. And so the bottom bit here became known as Whitcomb Street, which it still is today. I guess it was in the 1700s if memory serves. And then the middle bit became Hedge Lane from the original Coleman Hedge Lane. And the top bit became Soho as it became developed in the late 1600s. And so it all sort of changed with the development of the city. And then the land was given to a guy up that we're walking along Wardour Street. That we will be working along. It was given to a guy called Wardour. I think that was 1691, but Wardour Street wasn't called that until 1898. So Whitcomb Street, where we are now, is literally the very bottom of the old lane. And it's one of the quieter little streets. You know, considering it leads between Trafalgar Square, Leicester Square, it's usually not that busy. On the right here, there's the Thistle Hotel, and this greyed out doorway, about 20 years ago, used to be the Trafalgar pub. And that was very much like felt like a hotel pub. I don't know how related it was to the hotel, but it had that sort of feel. But me and the wife used to go in there quite frequently because it was nice and quiet. If we were uptown and we fancied a quiet drink before going to see a show or having a meal or whatever we were doing, this was one of our favoured pubs. But alas, no more. But you can see even now, you know, the style of the houses. It's very old-fashioned, isn't it? Let me see if I just tilt up. I'll show you a bit of the architecture. So, it says here, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, archaeologist, lived here. I have to say, I didn't know about him. I'll see what I can find out. If there's anything interesting, I'll put it in the text. Well, Oliver Twist. This one I've really got to check out. Oliver Twist, 1828-1897, orphan and Dickensian mused, sheltered here. That's got to be a piss take. Okay. Well, now, so I just met a very nice bloke called Demetrius, who liked my video setup, and he's just asked me about it. And it turns out he's done a lot of stuff with Ted Baker and hip-hop artists, whatnot, he was telling me. But very nice bloke. So, column, there we go. So we're still on Whitcomb Street, on the right hand side here. This whole square, or block I should say. Let me just wander over. Right, now you see all this blue and white block? This all got knocked down a few years ago and rebuilt. The whole square. I'm going to say within the last 10 years, but I think it's probably closer to within the last 5. But there used to be a lovely pub, a really old-fashioned pub, just on the corner here called the Hand and Racket. I used to really like it. And obviously it went when they demolished the place. Okay, so let's carry on up here. We've got the Panton Street Cinema on the left, which when I lived up London, I did frequent from time to time. So for those of you that are into Leicester Square, there you go. There's there. Just going to cross over here. Right. So this is where Wardour Street starts these days. Now I'm just going to point out this building on the right. Now, this used to be the Swiss Centre when I first moved to London, and in fact you can see they've still got a little Swiss clock thing there in the pedestrianised walkway. But this used to be a big building called the Swiss Centre. Again, they knocked it all down, rebuilt it, and put in a very British thing, the M&Ms. You know, completely British, obviously. But if you've been here in the 1700s, there used to be one of Britain's greatest ever artists, a guy called Joshua Reynolds, and he used to live here. Now, some artists, critics, have said not only was he one of Britain's greatest ever artists, but he was one of the greatest artists ever. And he founded and was the first president of the Royal Academy of Arts, so which is still going strong today down at Burlington House. But this is where he lived. Our first building is this one. So this is the Exchange and Bullion Office number 9 in 1798. Now, at this time, 1798, until, in fact, from 1724 until 1798, there was a guy called Benjamin Smart, who I believe lived here, and he did become an exchange and bullion dealer. Now you got to remember, in the 1700s, London was the world capital of sort of gold dealing, and obviously it would have been a very profitable business to get into. And later, in 1864, I think it was, or was it 1861? Either way, there was what I take to be his son and grandson, Edmund Smart, was recorded as living here, still in the family business. By the early 1900s, There was someone recorded here, probably as a result of the census, and he described himself as a private entertainer, and about 20 years after that, there was a chauffeur living here. But you can see that from the 1700s, this building and its history is still up on the wall, which is a nice touch. Now, for the information about that, if you want more details on it, credit where credit's due. Whenever I'm looking for the history of things, I've got a whole library of books, and I frequently will use those. But like anybody else, I also have a quick look on the internet and sort of look for a pointer to something that maybe I'm going to go and read about in more depth. When it came to that particular building, and another one I'm going to tell you about, somebody had got ahead of me. They had done all the work, and she's got a very good blog called Memoirs of a Metro Girl. So credit where credit's due. If you like to read your stuff as opposed to watching people like me wandering around the place with a camera, and if you want more detail, I highly recommend her blog, because I've read it over the years, different articles. Up here there is a sign that says the Magic Circle was founded on this site at Pinoli's restaurant by 23 magicians on July the 1st, 1905. Well, there you go. Who would have known? And if we look up, it's obviously called Fogo de Chao or something now, but if we tilt up, can you see that at the top, big letters, it says Pinoli. So from its origins, about 100 years ago, or a little 120. Now, obviously, can you guess we're entering Chinatown? This will be thronging with people before too long. This is why I like to get up early. Now, over here on the left, we have O'Neill's Bar. And I love this because it does all the work for me. I don't have to do too much thinking, too much research, because it tells you it all here. So here we go. This is the former site of the 1960s Flamingo Club, where Georgie Fame recorded Night Train. 1970s, it was Whiskey a Go-Go, where not only James Brown but also Cole and the gang played. In the 1980s and 90s, it was the Wag Club. 1984, David Bowie filmed the MTV video Blue Jean here. Anybody remember that? I certainly do. Blue Jean. That was the Tonight album, I think, and it had Love and the Alien. And he did a decent cover of the Beach Boys, God Only Knows if memory serves. And then 2001 to the present, O'Neill's Good Food, Drink and Great Crack. Now, my thoughts on Irish pubs outside of Ireland are basically, I have visited a few in various countries, and I have yet to visit one that actually feels like a pub in Ireland. But hey, they make money. They're spreading the culture in one form or another, so more part of their elbow. So we're now going to take a quick detour off into Gerrard Street, because there are a few plaques up here that are worth talking about. So I think we'll go for the ones on the right hand side first. Then we'll do the ones on the left hand side on the way back. There we go. Even the telephone box has got Chinatown written on it. Okay, so here we go, first one. The Golden Phoenix, but above that, it's got a brown plaque. And it says, Edmund Burke, author and statesman, lived here. Born 1729, died 1797. Now, Edmund Burke is from Dublin. And as I said, he's a statesman as well as an author. And he is the, what do you call, the philosophical father of the Tory party, which is basically over here is the right wing of politics. So in America that would be the Republicans. But his sort of philosophy and his writings on the subject have deemed him to be the sort of the father of sort of Tory thinking. So he's got a lot to answer for. But all I would say is one of his contemporaries, Edward Gibbon, the historian, described him as the most rational and eloquent madman he had ever met. So I think that tells you a lot. Now, this building has two claims to fame. So let's tilt up here. So the blue plaque on the right says, Ronnie Scott, jazz musician and raconteur, ran his club in the basement here, 1959 to 65. And basically at that time, this was apparently the only place where you could hear the more sort of modern jazz as opposed to the traditional stuff. So if you were into Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, The Loneliest Monk, this is where you would hear that sort of stuff being played. Obviously being recreated by other artists. So ran here until 65, and then it moved up to Frith Street, which we did on the Soho tour. So 60 years later it's still there. The green plaque says that this building was the site of the Westminster Post Office, of the penny post, and then the two penny post between 1794 and 1834. And basically the reason it's getting a plaque, because let's face it, there's been lots of post offices. This was the first public post office in Westminster, was here. So that's why that plaque is there. Up here we have a plaque that says Paul de Lamery, 1688 to 1751. The King's silversmith lived and worked in a house on this site between 1738 and 1751. Now, he is reckoned by the Victorian Albert Museum, which is pretty sort of elite place to be the best silversmith in the country in sort of the 1700s, and by 1717 he became the King's silversmith, and he trained under a Huguenot goldsmith. So mentioned before in the Soho walk about, and indeed in the Spitalfields one, that there was an influx of craftsmen and artisans in the late 1600s, and a lot of Huguenots came over, and he obviously got his training with one of them and then set out on his own and did very well indeed. And then we have up here the Loon Fung supermarket, which I have used on a number of occasions, and it says poet John Dryden lived here, and they were born 1631, died 1700. Now, it says poet, but he was more than that. He was a critic, he was a dramatist, as I mentioned in the Covent Garden tour. He was also known as a great wit, which got him a damn good beating. It nearly killed him. But such was his dominance of his writing in the last half of the 17th century that in literary terms it is just known as the Age of Dryden. So obviously a giant of his time, but he lived here. So Chinatown didn't become Chinatown until I think it was the 60s, maybe 70s. Prior to that, a lot of the Chinese people had lived down near the docks, but then with the Blitz and the destruction down that area, they moved out of the area, and up around here in Soho, as we had mentioned before, was a lot cheaper. Now, another supermarket which I've used was that Zing Long, but there's a green plaque there, and it says, here in the former Turk's Head Tavern, Dr. Samuel Johnson and Joshua Reynolds founded the club. It was known, I think it was known as the Literary Club, but they're saying the club in 1764. And here it stayed until 1783, because that's when the landlord of the Turk's Head Tavern died. So this was an original tavern from the 1700s, but now it's a supermarket. But basically, Samuel Johnson, who we mentioned on the Fleet Street walk, Again, a sort of giant in literary terms in his days in the 1700s. And Joshua Reynolds, the artist that we mentioned just around the corner, formed this club. So 1764, originally 9 members. By 1780, it had sort of expanded several times, and by 1780 it had 40 members, and then they basically had the cap. But the idea was, you get people who are at the top of their field, be it artists, writers, politicians, anybody that was science, anybody that was at the top of their field, and you get them all together and they talk and discuss, and in that way everybody learns more, and hopefully things develop and improve through discussion. And Johnson was obviously a big believer in this, because he was a member of a number of clubs and founded several of them himself, including literary clubs, literally. This one seems to have been developed more into a broader spectrum of interests, but that seems to have been Johnson's way. And apparently he was a bit of an argumentative bugger from what I've read, but he obviously did it with a purpose, which was to learn. And let's face it, isn't that the basis of a lot of our political establishment in theory? So, up here, can you see this plaque? I'll just tilt up. So it says, hold on, site of the Mont Blanc restaurant, pardon my French, were leading writers including Belloc, Chesterton, he did the Father Brown, didn't he? Joseph Conrad, Goldsworthy met regularly in the early years of the 20th century, as did D.H. Lawrence. And apparently there was a Tuesday club, and there was a guy called, I think it was Garrett, and he would basically sort of mentor a lot of these writers in their early days and sort of try and guide them in their writing. I'm guessing he was an agent or a critic of some sort. I told you I'd cough. Right, now I think that is it for the plaques in Gerrard Street. Now let me just have a quick look at how long I've been waffling. Oh, got a good half hour under a belt already. So I think we will end the first half of the walk here. And then we'll pick it up and do the rest of Wardour Street. So, yeah, I'm not going to spin around because otherwise you won't hear me. But basically, yeah, I'll film it down now. It's a bit prettier. So, yeah, that'll do for today's walk. Hope you enjoyed this part so far. We're going to do the second half, which will take us all the way up to Oxford Street. And as I say, we're walking through, what are we, 475 years of history. So I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully see you on part 2. Thanks for watching.